So hello, I'm going to just present you our latest work with respect to studying evolved massive stars in nearby galaxies using a photometric machine learning classifier. So Ilias has already mentioned why massive stars are important, so I'll provide a quick overview here. Massive stars are important for a number of different astrophysical domains, from nucleosynthesis. They are actually the main agents to produce elements during their lifetimes and during the supernova explosions. Moreover, these explosions provide a feedback mechanism that enhance the star formation and the environment of their host galaxies. Their end products, neutron stars and black holes, are places where we can study extreme physics, and they are actually the progenitors of the gravitational wave sources. As these stars are luminous and can be observed in more distant galaxies, they are an ideal tool to understand stellar evolution across cosmological times, especially for the first galaxies like those that will be observed from James Webb Space Telescope. Massive stars they are born like OB massive stars and they evolve with time to become, or not necessarily, be brachytelial supergiants, yellow supergiants, red supergiants, all this kind of zoo that we have in the massive stars. Although many key parameters that determine their evolution are in the initial mass, of course, metallicity, stellar rotation, mass loss, and binary interactions. The important thing is that although we know a lot, we still lack knowledge, especially beyond the main sequence. One of the key parameters here is mass loss. Mass loss is present in single stars as intense stellar winds, which are not necessarily homogeneous. While the presence of a companion can impact their evolution through mass transfer, something which is actually very frequent among the massive stars, as more than 70% are born in binary or multiple systems. Another manifestation of the mass loss is through episodic activity, where huge amount of mass is lost. This is particularly interesting for some of the phases of massive stars like luminous blue variables Hoof-Rayet, as you see in the last picture of Eta Carina. When this mass is lost, then it forms complex structures that can be visible, especially in infrared, around these objects. As you can see here, we can see cells and bipolar nebula around LBVs and Hoof-Rayets, or you can find even disks around the B brachytelial supergiants. What this tells us is that episodic mass loss must be important. Infrared photometry is an ideal tool for distinguish massive stars with dusty environments, as this has been demonstrated in the papers by Bonannos and Betavsky et al. However, we lack enough large samples of these sources with known spectral types in order to investigate the role of episodic mass loss in various metallicities. To address that, the ASSES team was formed in order to examine and answer questions like, what is the role of episodic mass loss in the evolution of massive stars? What is the frequency and how it depends on the metallicity? Do all phases of massive stars have outbursts? Are they linked? The strategy that we follow is to first identify candidates in about 25 nearby galaxies by using multi-wavelength photometry and state-of-the-art machine learning algorithms in order to build a spectral classifier, because we would like to identify a large number of these sources. Part of this work, part of this catalog of massive stars, you can see in a talk by Ming on Wednesday. Then the next step is to perform follow-up spectroscopy on these targets and extract stellar parameters using state-of-the-art codes like DUSTY. Part of this you will see on the next talk by Stephen. And then, as the last point, is to test these observations with the assumptions and the predictions made by the stellar evolution models and actually provide improved modeling if possible. Now, in this case, what we have used is to collect, first of all, a sample of well-classified sources in M31 and M33. This is the two galaxies for which we found the maximum or the largest sample of stars with known spectral types. This is supplemented by a number of sources found in WLM Sextans A and IC 1613, which are low metallicity galaxies. And for this, we have taken into account Gaia information in order to identify and remove potential foreground sources. And then we screen these catalogs with Spitzer and Panzer's photometry in order to derive our best candidates for algorithm. This includes about half of the initial sample of M31 and M33, which is the basis of the training sample that we are going to use. The other three galaxies are working as test galaxies in this approach. One important thing is to define the class we are going to use. As you see in this list, we have, if we take into account all unique spectral types, we get into 35 unique groups, which is kind of frustrating because you cannot really do much with groups with very low numbers. So what we did is we investigate which combinations that make, of course, some that have some reasoning can be used. We reached to this conclusion where we using 7 classes: blue supergiants, Wolf-Rayet, luminous blue variables, B brackety, yellow supergiants, red supergiants, and galaxies, which is a class that contains actually what we would consider as contamination, background galaxies, AGNs, that will be observed at these distances. For the classes, we have used some of the groups that we had before. Like, for example, we removed all candidate sources which were in blue supergiants. We removed candidate LBVs which were very uncertain, and we try to keep the most secure sources. Another thing which is critical in any machine learning algorithm is the feature selection. Without getting too much detail, we take the photometry as derived from Spitzer and Panstars. However, there are some issues, especially with some of the photometry in Spitzer. Most of the sources in our catalog have upper limits, which means they are not secure measurements of these bands. So we decided to remove altogether these bands. Moreover, we excluded G because it is the one, because it displays some issues with fainter sources, and it is the one affected mostly by extinction, which we do not correct for. Also, Gaia photometry, although it was used in order to derive astrometric information, we disregard the photometry because at the distance of these galaxies, most sources will not have any meaningful data. On LOL, we actually use the rest of these bands in order to form color indices which remove distance dependence. You can see the selected set, and on the right you can see how this looks like for each of these class of objects. In black lines you can see the individual sources, and with the color lines you can see the average shape of this color index per wavelength. And the last panel actually shows the difference between the different classes. Now, with respect to the implementation, we have used the scikit-learn, and we implement support vector classification, random forest, and a multi-layer perceptron, which is actually a fully connecting neural network. The best architecture for this was defined after some testing, as you can see on the bottom right, but don't pay too much attention. It is a bit too technical. And the structure that we opted for was 2 layers with 64 nodes each. For the optimization, we ran some k-folding optimization for the hyperparameters, as you can see on the bottom left. But because this is more technical, we can just skip it for now, and you can ask me later on whatever you want. Now, after identifying that, we are going to the results, how these classifiers perform on our sample. This is a confusion matrix, which on the left side, we have the true labels, what is the real spectral type, and on the bottom, you have the predicted. In reality, what you get out of this is how much confusion, as the name suggests, you get between the different classes. Ideally, what we would like to achieve in this case is to have unity across the diagonal. And you can see that more or less we can get it for red supergiants and B brackety also, but the values are different for the different classes. Another way to actually quantify the performance is by using these metrics like precision, recall, and F1 score. Without messing too much with the definitions, keep only recall, which is actually the recovery rate of the population in each case. For example, you can see that the B brackety stars are recovered almost, they are recovered all of them while for Wu-Frayet and LBVs, we are not recovering the majority. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that efficiently. Now, collectively, the results are here, but most probably this is one of the first times that plots are harder to read than a table. So this is the final performance on M31 and M33. Overall, the accuracy between the different methods is similar. Also, if you can see that when at the line which is defined as overall. For each class, we get a recall, and you can see that more or less are similar again between the different methods. However, there are cases where one of them is getting much better, like support vector classification is working better for LBVs as it returns something more meaningful than the other methods. Also in Wu-Frayet. This is actually due to the mixing of the natural mixing that we expect due to the properties of the features for these classes. LBVs, for example, are as a class of objects that present a lot of variability, both photometric and spectroscopic, and they are very rare objects. Also, it is actually one evolution path that drives all stars through LBV and then to Wu-Frayet. So we would expect naturally to have a mixture of their features between these classes. The red supergiants are more or less recovered very successfully. Yellow supergiants are in between because they lie actually in between blue supergiants and red supergiants. Now, given the similar performance of this algorithm and the fact that each one of them is working in a different way, we can actually combine the prediction by taking the probability of each method and combining with an equal weighting. On the last column, you see the results derived from this combined method, and you can see that more or less we are getting consistent results. Now, this was done for M31 and M33. How does this perform on the test galaxies that we set aside up to now? Having trained our combined classifier to the whole M31 and M33 sample, we apply and get this confusion matrix. You can see two things here. First of all, there is a slight problem in distinguishing between blue supergiants and yellow supergiants, and that the accuracy achieved in this case is about 75%, which is about 10% less for what we obtained for M31 and M33. What could be the reason for this? One thing is that we have missing data. Some sources do not have measurements in the selected bands that we are using. But our algorithm need specific values for this. Without getting into too much details, we have performed a statistical test in order to assess this importance. And actually what we do when we don't have the missing values, we just insert a mean value derived from the training sample. What we see is that this impact is only a few percent. So what is left is that the difference between these can possibly be justified because of the different metallicity between these two galaxies. M31 and M33 have metallicity around solar or a bit subsolar, while while these galaxies are much less, have a metallicity much lower, about 1/10 of solar metallicity. However, this can have an impact on how the extinction and the evolution could lead to shifts in the intrinsic color distributions. However, there are no data and samples enough to examine that thoroughly. Next, this is a very busy plot, in which we try to address how the performance changes with respect to the training, with the size of the training sample. What we would like to see is an increase as we put more and more sources. And that's why, because when you include more sources, then you increase the size and you actually increase the representativeness of the features for this particular class. What's next? Having actually developed this, we are going to apply this to about 1 million sources for which we have data from Spitzer. This extends for over 25 galaxies. up to 8 megaparsec, and with solar metallicities from 1/5 to 1/15 over to 3 solar masses. Some preliminary results you can see here, some color magnetic diagrams, and you can see on the left, for example, for MT1, how well the blue supergiants, yellow supergiants, and red supergiants are located in the proper places in the HR diagram. I will just conclude with my takeaway points, of which I will just mention the third one, which is the follow-up observations to reveal the true nature of these sources. This is something underway. We have obtained observation. We are under, and they are under analysis, under reduction right now. And the last thing is that this work has been already submitted as a paper. So thank you, and I will be happy to take any questions either here or over the Slack.
Thank you, Grigori. Any questions for Grigoris? I see there is a question by Stavros Akras.
Yes. Hi, Grigoris. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yeah. Thank
you. Thank you. Very interesting work. My question is, I'm not expert on machine learning. Okay, so I'm still playing with that. But basically, you are trying to distinguish 6 different classes of massive stars, right? So yes. My question is, instead of trying to find one criteria to distinguish at the same time all these different classes, have you tried to distinguish or to find those criteria that separates one specific classics from the rest mimics? Let's say if you merge all the groups in one mimic sample, let's say, and try to distinguish only one group from the rest of them, not all at the same time, the 6 groups at the same time, sorry.
So you mean if there is a way, let me go a bit back to this, if you can distinguish blue supergiants from all the rest, right?
Yes, and then you have to repeat, of course, for the rest of the types, but probably there are different criteria.
Yes. So the traditional way to do that is actually you take the color magnetic plots and you define the cuts in these plots. Mm-hmm. However, this can be complex and can be frustrating, actually, in trying to do that in multiple CMTs. Actually, Ming has done a lot of work on this, and this is what he's going to present, I suppose. So the idea was to do the same, but at the same time for all of this. In reality, we have actually run receiving operator curves for all this, where they treat each class as a binary, like the source belongs to this class that you examine, or none, which means everything else. So in principle, you could take also that model and play with this. So all in all, I would say that we try to do that at the same time, but there is some information that you can take from the ROC curves, which is something we didn't think, to be honest, to do that.
Okay, thank you. Just the last comment is that if you merge your different kind of classes, you can also increase your training sample, because your samples have very different are very different the population. So this definitely is the well-known imbalance problem in machine learning.
Sure. This is one. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Finish.
No. That's it. It may solve the problem. We can discuss this later on, because I have the same problem.
So it is true that there is, astrophysics is well known for imbalanced samples, right? It is much easier to work with 3. For example, we could split that in hot, yellow, like medium temperature, and red, cool types. Of course, the accuracy is improving. However, you are losing the important information, because some of these targets are a bit more interesting than others. For example, to identify a B bracketeer or a Hufraget or an LPV is more important than identify another blue supergiant. So that's why we try to be a bit more detailed on this work. Yes, I have tried that, but you can get a better result with 3 classes, but that doesn't fulfill our purposes. So that's why we end up with this. But definitely imbalance is a strong issue. Now, I have played also with augmenting the data set, and some other applications, but this didn't improve much because more or less this is some kind of limitation because of the feature distributions that you have. If you don't have a full representative sample of your population, you cannot do more. You cannot generate more data.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much.
Thanks.